I'm Miana. I'm from Washington, D.C. I am the founder of the Mental Elephant, and we are a mental health organization based in the United States, but we tend to do things internationally. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. So, like I said earlier, I actually pivoted this workshop because I wanted it to fit in more so with the other workshops. So instead of doing mental health in the Black community, we're going to be discussing mental health and culture as a whole and how culture affects mental health. Okay, so 4 ways that culture impacts mental health. So the first one is stigma. In every culture, everybody has a different way of looking at mental health, right? So I know I can speak heavily for the African American community because I grew up in a majority African American county, gone to majority Black schools all of my life, currently go to a HBCU. So Black is heavily my life. So I know heavily in the African American community, mental health is looked at as a weakness in a sense. It's looked at as definitely something that we don't talk about, something that we don't really acknowledge within families, within communities, even within schools. Mental health in the Black community is definitely something that is just now starting to really kind of be pulled and talked about. So like I said, cultures heavily affect mental health and heavily affect how we look at mental health. So when it comes to the stigma, a lot of cultures around the world definitely have a stigma behind mental health solely because mental health is invisible. You can't see it like how you can see a broken leg, how you can see a broken ankle. So a lot of people don't necessarily believe it. Also, a lot of people, and we'll get into it, certain parts of the world look at mental health as more of a medical issue compared to other parts of the world looking at it as more of a spiritual issue and more of an alignment with the self type of issue. So definitely stigma depends on what part of the world that you're from. For many, there's a growing stigma around mental health, and mental health challenges are considered a weakness and something to hide. And this can make it harder for those struggling to talk openly and ask for help. Every culture can determine how a person even wants to acknowledge their mental health, even wants to bring it up to other people, if they want to bring it up to other people. And then, in addition to understanding symptoms, in different cultures, symptoms may look different. So I know as a Black woman, one of our big symptoms that come with depression is irritability and anger. It's a lot of things that Black women definitely struggle with, the irritability part, and not really being able to correctly kind of word how we're feeling and what we're going through. But because of the stigma of the angry Black woman, it's difficult to kind of express those symptoms because nobody really wants to hear about it behind depression and anxiety because of that stigma that Black women already have, if you kind of get what I'm saying. So let's kind of switch it if we go more to an Asian stereotype. So I know Asian stereotypes are heavily kind of focused on academia and excellence and wanting to focus on making sure that you know everything in schooling and everything. However, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to ADHD, you have those symptoms of hyperfixation, you have those symptoms of only being able to focus on one thing and dedicating your whole life to that one specific thing, that may not actually look like a symptom or look like a mental health disorder within a culture that heavily pushes the need to work all the time, even though it is. Because to some other cultures, hyperfixation can be weird and can be something that we don't really want to acknowledge. So yeah, symptoms definitely play into a factor. Community support. So definitely cultural factors can determine how much support someone gets from their family and community when it comes to mental health. Because of existing stigmas, minorities are sometimes left to find mental health treatment and support alone. So this goes back into the stigma. Different cultures have different stigmas. So going into a culture that has a heavy stigma around mental health, you're going to kind of be wary or not necessarily want to get that community support, if there even is community support available. Definitely coming from a community that has a harsh stigma around mental health is definitely something that, as we stated earlier, is hidden, that we're not talking about, that we don't want to talk about. So it's not something that's being brought up in the community. So the community is bringing all of these great resources and all of these great things and scholarships and all of these great things that help, but we're not acknowledging the mental health aspect. We're not acknowledging how people are feeling, if people are being mindful, if people are actually functioning within a good space to do all of these other extracurriculars. And then the fourth one is access to resources. So when looking for mental health treatment, you want to talk to someone who understands your specific experiences and concerns, right? So I know when I look for doctors, I tend to look for doctors that are either women or honestly are African American. Just because if I'm trusting someone with my health, I want it to be someone that is going to be able to relate to me, right? I feel like that's what everybody tends to kind of do. So that's difficult if your culture already does not necessarily support mental health resources and you still need that resource because it's limited. I know roughly, I think the last time I looked at the numbers, roughly 3% of psychologists in America are Black. And then only 1% of that are Black women. So it makes it extremely difficult for us to find resources of people that understand us or have specific experiences and concerns. And it can sometimes be difficult or time consuming to find resources and treatment options that take into account specific cultural factors and needs. So we'll pause right here because I do want you all to kind of interact. What are some ways that you all feel like your specific culture, if you want to elaborate, impacts mental health in a positive or in a negative way?
I think, like you said, in Asian household, mental health is a little bit it's difficult to talk about because we're focused on like doing well in academics and just like pushing ourselves in academics. And I think that as talking about mental health can be stigmatized, people can be like, oh yeah, you can just ignore that and focus on your studies, or just like push it away. Yeah, I really agree with what you were saying about Asian stereotypes, because I feel like majority of, I feel like the Asian Americans that I know have immigrant parents, and since they're immigrants, I think that they grew up in an environment that was very traditional. And over there, I think in like their home countries or original countries, it was very difficult to talk about mental health because it was like repressed for so long, and talk about mental health has only recently become so like normalized, and it is something that should be normalized because everybody experiences it, but some people don't understand that they're experiencing it because it's just been repressed for so long.
Right, that I definitely agree with. And I think that's across a lot of cultures. We've repressed so much because as a people, every culture has experienced some type of trauma or some type of issue that as a culture we've had to get through, we've had to push through. And it's difficult to push through those things if you are honestly focusing solely on mental health, if you are focusing solely on the things that are wrong or the things that are difficult. So I feel like a lot of cultures, if not almost all, definitely have some sort of stigma, some sort of hesitation towards true, pure mental health support or mental health treatment or just even mental health conversations.
I actually agreed with what they said too, but there is also a lot of things that we don't focus on ourselves, like as an Asian community, is a lot of emotional support, because like you mentioned, like the academic things are always there, but like most of the time it's not even the emotional support is there, because like others have mentioned, it's always like you're grinding, you're doing well, and it's always like most of the time it's always like you're doing well in school, like what more do you need help with? And sometimes I feel like that's pushed away because lack of emotional support that we get a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. And I feel, um, I guess you all just chime in and kind of elaborate a bit more. So, how does the mental health stigma coincide when academics are not good? Like, if it's somebody that's in that community who actually is not doing well with their academics, do we focus solely on like where they're messing up, maybe they're not learning correctly, or is that when we actually go into maybe it's a mental health situation?
I feel like in my experience, when like in since I'm like a junior in high school, like there are times when my grades start to like go on like a decline, because I am a junior in high school and it is difficult to keep up with everything, and there's also so much like external pressure and internal pressure in terms of like competition at school. And I feel like whenever like my grades decrease, I find my parents just like going towards like the route where it's like maybe you're just not doing it right, you have to put more effort in, instead of just like asking if something's wrong, if you need help, if you're just doing okay. Because for me, it's like if I'm not doing okay, if I'm not in a good mental state, my grades obviously aren't going to do as well. But when I'm happier and more focused, I'm able to do better in school.
Okay, I support that. And actually, now that I think about it, I feel like when it comes to schools, this is also where culture heavily plays in. Because within the school environment, depending on the type of schooling you're in, it's normally similar cultures tend to kind of group together and kind of stay within their same space or their same kind of people, the people that they know, what the culture that they know. So when you're in that space and you're seeing the same people every day doing the same work, trying to progress, like you said, it becomes a competition. Realistically, it can become a competition, and that competition can be rough when you add mental health into it, because what am I supposed to do if I'm mentally struggling, have no motivation? My friends are telling me they're getting A's on this, and that. My parents are telling me I'm not applying myself enough and I'm not focusing enough. And realistically, I'm just not motivated. But now I'm telling myself, well, maybe I am not applying myself. So it definitely, thank you for bringing up the schooling part. I feel like culture, mental health, and school definitely has a large intersection of just impacting youth mental health as a whole. Cool. Anybody else had any comments or anything they wanted to add?
So me and I actually go to the same school, but the thing with us, with my parents, is when grades aren't doing well, the first thing they ask is why. But then the second thing is always like, we'll find you resources to, like, maybe we'll get you like another tuition class, or like maybe we should go and find a tutor or something, or like why is like they're always trying to fix the issue, which is appreciated. But I think most of the time they don't really know if we're also doing okay. And a lot of the external pressures that come in is because our parents are always telling us, like, the real world is really competitive. So if you're not able to stay in that now, like, what are you going to do in the future? It's like most of the time it's very future centric, which I understand. It's important to think about it, but also, like, it's been realizing for me and others, it's like we should also be thinking about our present situation because it can be so drived into something, but also we should be thinking about our present and like if we're doing okay. So it's like sometimes it's hard to talk because everything is always around like maybe we could get you something else, or like maybe we could find some other resources. But I don't think sometimes people understand, especially in our culture, is the kid is also okay a lot because it's always like do more of this so you can be your future really good. But sometimes it's also like is the present also okay?
No, I definitely feel that, because I also feel in that same breath, how am I supposed to be concerned about my future if I don't even know how to get through the now? I'm not even thinking about my future, how my grades are going to affect my future, what my career is going to be, and any of that if I don't even know what tomorrow is going to look like because I don't feel well today. So I definitely feel that. I feel that also, and again, open-ended question. I feel that also maybe goes into, so something that I've learned, I'm currently a social worker for an alternative school in Washington, D.C., and our population is genuinely 99% African American. I've noticed that a lot of our children struggle when it comes to speaking to their parents about mental health, because it would require their parents to acknowledge their own mental health, which becomes a problem. A lot of people, and I feel like even in other cultures, it's difficult to talk to your child about mental health and the importance of mental health and how their mental health is doing when you don't even know how to sit and acknowledge your own, in a sense. And also in that same breath, I know when I was diagnosed with depression, my mom had a hard time with it because she felt like she did something wrong. So I think that that may also be what adds into the parents' need to focus on other things and not really want to hint mental health, because they feel like if there's something wrong with their mental health, then it's something that I did in their childhood, or something that I didn't do, or something that I didn't meet, instead of acknowledging the biological and genetic factors that can go into it. Okay, so this is just more statistics, but studies have shown that depression is more common in cultures that value individualism and achievement than in collectivist cultures. And while anxiety disorders are found across all cultures, they tend to be expressed differently in different cultures. In Western cultures, anxiety is often experienced as fear or dread. In contrast, in Eastern cultures, it may be more likely to be experienced as physical symptoms such as heart palpitations or dizziness. So kind of like we talked about a bit earlier, not only do people describe symptoms differently and look at symptoms differently based on their culture, symptoms also present differently all around based on cultures, based on where you are, based on what you know, based on what you're raised, based on your environment, and based on values. Depression is definitely going to be more common in cultures that highlight individualism, because if you're a person who's struggling to know who you are, what you want in life, and where you're going to go, you don't have that individualism. You don't have that sense of self. So it's going to lead to depression, along with achievements. If you feel you're not achieving at the same rate as your peers, you're not achieving or getting the grades that your peers are, you're not reaching an achievement that your parents want, it's more likely that you're going to experience symptoms of depression. And I think the last one, was just a statistic in a poll that they took, where 68% of people stated that people with mental illnesses should not be given any responsibility. And they also felt 60% of people, one of the main causes of mental illness is the lack of self-discipline and willpower. So a lot of these are not at all correct, not at all what I believe in, but it's just to show how different cultures think, how different cultures highlight things, what different cultures think of mental illness. Because a lot of things that we also have to pay attention to is because we're in a social media world, we're in a world now where people can easily be put on blast, people can easily be put out there. People don't necessarily express how they really feel. So you may be meeting someone that says, yeah, your anxiety's fine and everything, but internally they're thinking, all right, I'm not going to ask her to do nothing. I'm not going to give her any I'm not going to give her any hard task. I'm not going to ask to hang out or anything because I know her anxiety is bad or because I know she has a mental illness, if that makes sense. And then this is the last thing, and I will open the floor to anyone that had any comments or questions. I just did want to point out something that I thought was interesting was 49% of people who took this survey felt that most women who were once patients in a mental health hospital cannot be trusted as babysitters. I found that interesting because in my mind, if you feel you cannot trust a woman that was once a patient as a babysitter, what did that mean for a woman who wants to be a mom? Like a woman who at some point did need to receive treatment for a mental health issue, was able to receive treatment, is now doing better, but because they at one point in time went to a mental hospital, they no longer can be trusted to be a mother or to care for others, even though they were able to have the self-awareness to realize within themselves they weren't doing okay. I don't know, I find that interesting. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. I know this was kind of sporadic, but like I said, I changed this like last minute because I didn't want to just sit here and talk to you all about Black people do this and Black people do that, because I want it to be an inclusive a discussion. So does anybody have any questions, comments, anything they want to state, anything they feel?
I have one. You know how you talked about like the angry Black woman stereotype?
Yes.
How do you think like men's mental health differs from women's mental health in terms of like cultural pressures?
I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, that's going to affect that is head of household. A lot of cultures heavily focus on the man being the head of household, the man leading everyone, the man making the most money, the man being the strong one. So in my opinion, in a lot of cultures, it's a lot more difficult for men to express that they have mental health issues or to reach out for resources or to even speak to anyone because they are forced to uphold that imagery of being strong, being the pinnacle, being the patriarch, instead of allowing people to understand vulnerability, allowing people to understand that we're still humans, allowing people to understand that the human brain controls everything. From the moment you wake up, it controls your first breath to every moment that you're asleep. So it's okay for it to mess up. It's okay for it to struggle sometimes. It's okay for it to go into fight or flight mode for no reason. That's what it is. But I feel like definitely when it comes to cultures, and even as a woman, and I know as a woman it's difficult, but as women, we are allowed the grace to be emotional, to be sensitive, because we're women. That's what, oh, women are sensitive, women cry. So we're allowed that space. Men aren't allowed that same space. I know within Asian communities, men are definitely seen as the stone, as like the foundation, as this is what this is. So they don't want to show their daughters, their wife, that vulnerability, that scare, that fear, that constant doubt of self, doubt of others. So I feel like, just to answer your question, I feel like men genuinely may have it a bit harder to truly be able to discuss mental health and receive resources solely because they feel and are told they have to live up to that patriarch status. Anybody else? Okay, I have a question just because I am one culture to another. How is overall, do you all feel mental health is looked at just in general for women in you all's culture?
I know like in I'm Indian, so I know that a lot of my friends feel like they can't go to their parents and be like, hey, like I am not feeling okay right now. And I feel like that's really hard. That also like worsens your mental health in a way because it's like you're not receiving the help you need, and also you're having that pressure at home that you're not supposed to be feeling what you're feeling. And so yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it also plays a part in how your parents are and how like I guess progressive they are because I mean I'm lucky enough to have parents that like understand the struggle of high school. So if I go to them and I tell them like I'm like really not feeling it, I don't want to like do my homework, they understand it and but like they still continue to like push me and they don't like take a step back just because I'm not feeling too good. They just try to motivate me and they're very understanding. So I think like even though there are some stereotypes about like different cultures, I feel like it more depends on whether the person themselves or like the individual themselves is like more progressive or modern and has like branched away from like the typical stereotypes.
Yeah, like I know my parents, they're always pushing me to like do like challenging things, but because they know I can do it. So when I'm like, okay, I can't do this, it's really hard for me, they understand. And I understand that's not how it is for a lot of people. But I'm really grateful because my parents really do understand that it's hard. And I know that like it's different when, especially like if your parents haven't grown up here because they just grew up in a different environment. So my parents came here, they didn't know what AP classes were, they didn't know what the high school environment like here was. So when they just kind of heard AP classes are good on your transcript, like I remember in middle school, like my parents were like, okay, in freshman year, you're going to take like 1 or 2 APs. And then like in sophomore year, you're going to take more. And then when they realized, like in 10th grade, I took my first two, they realized how difficult they are. They're like, okay, yeah, no, like, if I was a freshman taking those, I would have been like crying every day. I would have been a mess. And I think they realized that. So I think it's just like, as Nanya said, like the individual person, but also just like knowing what it's like and being educated on how, like, the kinds of things they're doing. So,
Well, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you guys for inviting. You all have actually like literally made my day. But yeah, that was all I had for you guys. So thank you.